So to 10, let's look at this issue. US President Donald Trump sparking global attention with his latest remarks threatening possible military action against Nigeria over what he describes as the persecution of Christians. Speaking during a campaign-style rally in the United States, Trump claimed that Christian communities in Nigeria are being slaughtered and accused the Nigerian government of turning a blind eye. His comments have drawn sharp criticism from diplomatic observers who warned that such rhetoric could inflame religious tensions and strain U.S. Nigeria relations. We speak now to Dr. Olayinka Ajala, senior lecturer in politics and international relations at Leeds Beckett University. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us, Dr. Ajala.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
So this commentary or posturing by President Donald Trump towards Nigeria, how different is it to his rhetoric on South Africa?
Yeah, thank you. This is very different because it involves the threat of direct military action, and that makes it unprecedented. So when you look at a lot of the rhetoric of President Trump, it's mostly along the punishing countries with tariffs or with trade embargo. The only country that has been directly threatened with military action is Venezuela, and he actually carried that out in terms of, attacking boats destined for the U.S. from Venezuela. So this is really unprecedented, and it's very significant because of the threat of direct military action against insurgent groups in the country.
So would you say then it marks a shift and a pertinent one in U.S. multilateral diplomacy and partnership?
It does, because when you look at the way everything unfolded, it unfolded very quickly. When you have these kind of things happening, a country being designated, the first step is normally a situation whereby diplomatic or direct engagement are involved. There could be public condemnation or a threat of withdrawal of assistance. So when a country is designated as a country of particular concern, the first step is always negotiation, diplomatic engagement or direct negotiation in some forms. But when it goes directly to the threat of withdrawal of aid and possible military action, then it takes it to the next level, because it seems the country has not been given adequate time or attention to address the allegations.
But then I'm just also trying to understand, are we seeing a trend in terms of President Trump's foreign policy, and is it one that finds resonance in Capitol Hill, for instance, or is it fair that there could be critics of this move as a president who is intent on exerting, some sort of unilateral power in a multipolar environment?
Yeah, absolutely. It's very significant, and it's saying a very different scenario playing out here. And the reason is because for people who really understand the dynamics of insecurity in Nigeria, it's very multi-layered, and it's something that's gone on for a very long time. So, for instance, Nigeria has experienced religious violence since 1953. That's 7 years even before the country's independence. And successive military and democratic governments have tried and to a very large extent failed to curb the issues of religious intolerance in some places. So we need to be very clear that when we talk about the issue of religious intolerance, the killing of Christians and even Muslims in place, it's not really widespread all over the country. It happens in some selected places, some places that are either ungoverned or alternatively governed, or areas where the government does not have adequate resources to protect. So it's not something that just started, or it's not something that is, it's something that's gone on for a very long time. Although the Nigerian government would argue this is not genocide, this is religious violence. Christians are being killed, Muslims are also killed. So it's very dynamic, it's very multifaceted, and it needs to be viewed from that perspective. So when it's not viewed from that multi-layered, multi-dimensional perspective, and it's interpreted as Christians are endangered in the country, they are being killed, and the U.S. needs to take unilateral action, then it signals a new kind of foreign policy that we've not really seen in Africa.
And this is when you keep saying multi, as I go back to that question on an environment where certainly Africa and the world are saying, the world is becoming more multipolar. So is this something that is going to hurt or strengthen President Donald Trump if we look at Africa's relations with Russia and China? But he uses religious persecution rhetoric as a tool of foreign policy and employing some sort of moral judgment, while at the same time threatening military powers. So is this a calculated move, and is it a move that's going to work for or against him?
It depends on how it plays out at the end of the day. If this threat results in significant curb in the killings in the country, there's nobody that is arguing that there are no killings in the country. The question is it targeted entirely or solely on Christians, or is it just the fact that they are bandits, they are terrorists, they attack people regardless of creed or religion or ethnicity? So if it plays out at the end of the day, the Nigerian government are able to explain that the presidency is already seeking audience with Trump. If they're able to get that audience and explain that, okay, this is what is happening and this is what you can do to help us, and that then results in the reduction of attacks or the of killing generally in the country, then it could work in favor of the president, of President Trump, because he could come and say, well, I issued this threat and it resulted in the cessation of violence against Christians or against Nigerians. So it could work in that way. If he carries out the threat, which I personally think is quite unlikely, but again, with what is happening in Venezuela, you can never 100% gauge how President Trump will react. But if he carries out that threat and then it makes an already volatile situation even more volatile and engulfs the whole region, then it could backfire and work against the interests of the U.S. Because we need to understand that Nigeria is the most populous black country on earth, and anything that happens in Nigeria affects the whole of West Africa and the Sahel. So if it goes out of hand and then it results in a situation whereby the countries become ungovernable, then it could backfire very badly.
And as I'm listening to you speak, I just have this imagery that on some level, and there is a question in it of whether or not America is not behaving like the school bully, in the sense that President Trump has often been known to tout how America is the biggest, strongest democracy in the world, which is quite ironic if the behavior that is being followed now is almost of having schoolboy principal relations, of going before the principal to argue something that, as you say, is notably not true if one is interested in knowing the intimate politics of a country, which is what he has advisors for in foreign policy.
Yeah, the issue here is the fact that this is not just America or the Congress in America taking action against Nigeria. So there are people within Nigeria, there are Nigerians in America, Nigerians in diaspora that are also calling and crying for help. The Middle Belt region of Nigeria, states like Benue State, Nasarawa State, Taraba State, have witnessed violence in the last 10 years. There have been a lot of violent conflict between farmers and pastoralists. There have been sectoral violence. There have been violence as a result of climate change, for instance. So one of the things, like in my own research, one of the things I found out is the fact that because of the vagaries of the climate in northern Nigeria, pastoralists are being driven further southward, and this is resulting in competition for resources, competition for water. And so all of these things, they are not just people within the U.S. Congress saying this is what is happening and we need to take action. A lot of it stems as a result of Nigerians within Nigeria and in diaspora calling the U.S. president, calling the U.S. Congress, sending in reports and saying this is happening, the U.S. needs to do something. So this is why it becomes even more complicated. If it is a unilateral decision of the U.S. government coming in and saying, oh, this is happening in your country, then we need to come in and act. Then we could use the illustration of the school boy bully or the school bully trying to exert his power on the weaker students in the school. But because there are people within within Nigeria who are also calling for the U.S. to have, who have data to show that, well, Nigerians are being killed on a day-to-day basis. We all have this data. The question I'm asking is it disproportionately against Christians? Yes, in some places you could argue that more. I carried out an analysis, for instance, this morning on the publication I'm working on, and I found out that in the last 8 years, there have been an increase in attacks on churches and mosques. But when you look at the ratio, it's like 2 to 1. For every 2 churches attacked, 1 mosque is attacked. This tells us 2 things. One, Muslims are also affected and they are also attacked. But it seems to be disproportionately against Christians. So you could argue that the people that have brought these allegations also have a point. But is it a genocide, as is being alleged? I actually I doubt that.
And that's what I want to get to, because continuing with that analogy, if then we're saying the U.S. president is the avenger of the vulnerable and downtrodden, as we're seeing in his accusations against South Africa of white Afrikaners being persecuted. Well, there are even many more Afrikaners who are saying, but, you know, this is as a result of crime where everybody's affected. Then, what of regional autonomy? Is that something that is recognized by the U.S. foreign policy? And secondly, if you are being the benevolent intervener, are you doing it effectively? If you are saying it's Christian genocide, how are you then being effective if the brief is not correct?
That's absolutely the question that has been asked by many Nigerian politicians and policymakers. Some even Christian leaders, pastors, coming out and saying, well, is there an ulterior motive to this? Is there really? So it's really it's an interesting scenario, to say the least, because you could argue that, well, if sincerely the United States is actually interested in Christians across the world, then we need to look at Christians in Sudan. We need to look at Christians in other places that are being persecuted. And we need to also see if the same stick is wielded or is threatened to be wielded against these people as well. So there are a lot of conspiracy theories in Nigeria at the moment. People asking questions are saying, one, why moving from level 1, no engagement, no diplomacy, to level 2, the threat of direct action? And then 2, why is Nigeria singled out in Africa? You mentioned the case of South Africa. There was no threat of violence against people in South Africa that are accused of attacking white people in South Africa, for instance. So these are the questions that people are raising, and it's actually a very fluid situation right now, because on one hand, the government is trying to put its foot on ground and say, no, this is not happening. But at the same time, because there are elements of attacks and people being killed as well, it's very difficult for the government to 100% exonerate itself and say, well, this is not happening. And then again, is the story of the Sharia law, which again is something that was played a lot. 12 Nigerian states actually carry out Sharia law in parallel with the conventional Nigerian constitution and laws. So this also raised questions. Are people in these 12 states, are they disproportionately attacked? Are Christians in these states disproportionately attacked? So there is a whole lot to unpack when we look at what is happening on ground in Nigeria and then the threat by the U.S. government.
Thank you very much, Dr. Olayinka Ajala, Senior Lecturer in Politics and International Relations at Leeds Beckett University, speaking to us about U.S. President Donald Trump threatening military action against the West African country Nigeria for what he's accused it of carrying out Christian genocide.